What if I told you the speed of your metabolism is largely dependent on your sleep? Today I want to go over a study titled Insufficient Sleep Undermines Dietary Efforts to Reduce Adiposity. But first, my name is Logan Allen. I'm a master's student studying human performance and strength and conditioning. This study examined whether sleep restriction could compromise the effects of a reduced calorie diet. Today, a growing number of people are getting insufficient sleep, partially due to modern society, but this insufficient sleep may be contributing to weight gain. Previous research has indicated that sleep deprivation can result in increased hunger, greater amounts of ghrelin, and reduced amounts of leptin. But what are ghrelin and leptin? Ghrelin is often called the hunger hormone because it stimulates the appetite, facilitates the retention of fat, reduces energy expenditure, and contributes to insulin release, just to name a few. Leptin is another hormone that has mostly the opposite effect of ghrelin. It reduces hunger and regulates energy expenditure. And like ghrelin, it has a lot of other functions as well. But for today, we're just focusing on the ones that are associated with energy and energy balance. But that's enough about hormones for now. Excess fat mass, otherwise known as adiposity, is known to be associated with several different health risks, including heart disease, diabetes, and even cancer. One of the main strategies people use to lose excessive weight is a reduced calorie diet. However, this becomes increasingly difficult when we are sleep deprived, but we'll cover that more later. When talking about the topic of weight loss and total energy expenditure, it is very important to understand the concept. Total energy expenditure can be broken up into three main categories. First, and in no particular order, we have resting metabolic rate. This is the amount of energy you would spend if you laid in bed all day and did absolutely nothing. Second, we have the thermic effect of food. This is the energy we use to digest, absorb, and store the food that we eat. On average, this is about 10% of our daily expenditure. Third, we have physical activity related expenditure. This includes all the movements we make, intentional and non-intentional. So this would include anything from exercise to NEAT. Okay, so now that we've covered some of the background information, let's get into the study. This study recruited 12 participants that had a BMI of 25 to 32. None of them smoked, and they slept between 6.5 and 8.5 hours per night. Participants were excluded from the study if they had any self-reported sleep problems, worked the night shift, had variable sleep habits, took daytime naps, worked a physically demanding job, exercised regularly, were depressed, excessively drank caffeine or alcohol, and they used any medications that would affect sleep quality, as well as any abnormal findings on their medical history. Basically, they were excluded from the study if they had any conditions or habits that would impact the quality of their sleep and thus ruin the integrity of the study itself. Of the 12 participants that were recruited for the study, only 10 participants finished the study. Participants spent 2 full weeks in the laboratory twice, with 3 months in between each 2-week block. They were randomly assigned a time in bed of 5.5 hours or 8.5 hours. For the first 2-week block, participants were randomly assigned a time of 5.5 hours per night in bed or 8.5 hours per night in bed. Whatever time the participants were assigned in the first block, they were assigned the opposite time for the second 2-week block. So if they were assigned 5.5 hours the first time, they'd be assigned 8.5 hours the second time, and vice versa. In order to get the 5.5 hours per night in bed without affecting the circadian phase, the time was cut back from both ends. So they went to bed later and woke up earlier. No naps were allowed for the duration of the study. Everyone that participated in the study was assigned the same diet. The diet was restricted to 90% of the resting metabolic rate and consisted of 48% carbohydrate, 34% fat, and 18% protein. The participants were also given a daily multivitamin/mineral to ensure that they were still receiving all the required vitamins and minerals. The authors measured a lot of different variables, including respiratory quotient, which is a measure of how much carbon dioxide you are breathing out, and can tell you what you're using as a fuel source. So it can tell you if you're burning mostly carbs or mostly fats or proteins or a combination of all 3 or 2 of those. Second, they measured muscle mass and fat mass via a DEXA scan, which is the gold standard when it comes to measuring body composition. They measured total energy expenditure via doubly labeled water. They measured total body water changes, fasting body weight, hunger levels, as well as hormone profiles, which included leptin, ghrelin, cortisol, growth hormone, epinephrine and norepinephrine, thyroid stimulating hormone and T4, as well as T3 in participants that were able to give enough blood. Okay, so what did they find? The average time of sleep when the participants were in the 8.5-hour time in bed block was 7 hours and 25 minutes. The average time of sleep when the participants were in the 5.5-hour time in bed block was 5 hours and 14 minutes. Participants consumed the same amount of calories during each 2-week block. But here's where it gets interesting. Participants lost about the same amount of weight whether they were in the 5.5-hour time block or the 8.5-hour time block. About 3 kilograms, or in freedom units, about 6.5 pounds. Although the weight participants lost in both blocks was about the same, the weight loss was not the same internally. When the participants were in the 5.5-hour time block, they lost about 0.6 kilograms of fat and 2.4 kilograms of muscle. On the other hand, when the participants were in the 8.5-hour time block, they lost about 1.4 kilograms of fat and 1.5 kilograms of muscle. It is important to note that the participants were in a large calorie deficit and were not exercising. So it should be expected that they will lose both fat and muscle. The surprising part is how much more muscle and how much less fat was burned during the 5.5-hour time block. Ideally, in the real world, if you are wanting to lose weight, you should be in a calorie deficit, but you should also be getting enough protein and strength training. This will allow you to maintain or gain muscle while losing fat. And this is what most people want and is what the toned look really is. More muscle and less fat. Muscle mass is also extremely important as we age. The older we get, the harder and harder it becomes to put on muscle, and thus the harder it becomes to stay strong and independent. Muscle mass helps maintain and improve your bone mineral density, helps improve insulin sensitivity, improves your hormones, and dramatically reduces your chances of all-cause mortality. In the words of Dr. Lane Norton, if you want to be metabolically healthy, the best thing you can do is have lots of lean body mass. So the best time to start training, specifically strength training, is now. It's never too late, but it is crucial that you do. But I digress. Let's get back into the study. 8.5 hours in bed resulted in much more fat loss and much less muscle loss when compared to the 5.5-hour block. When the participants were in the 5.5-hour block, they reported feeling more hungry and had a higher respiratory quotient when compared to the 8.5-hour block. A high respiratory quotient typically means that you're burning more carbs than fat. When in the 5.5-hour time block, participants also had increased concentrations of ghrelin, or the hunger hormone, lower epinephrine levels, and a lower resting metabolic rate by about 400 calories. A lower resting metabolic rate by 400 calories per day is huge. That means that you might not have a slow metabolism, maybe you're just not sleeping enough. Between the two groups, there were no statistically significant differences found between leptin, thermic effect of food, norepinephrine, growth hormone, cortisol, or thyroid hormone. Okay, so that was what they found, but what does it mean? This study indicates that sleep plays a very important role in preserving muscle mass when in a caloric deficit. The differences in respiratory quotients indicate that you burn more fat when you have sufficient sleep, but you burn more carbs such as blood sugar and glycogen when you're more sleep deprived. Ghrelin was also indicated to be increased when in a sleep deprived state, which is most likely why the participants reported feeling more hungry when sleep deprived. All in all, when you are sleep deprived, you burn more muscle, you burn less fat, and are hungrier. Not to mention, you burn less calories in total throughout the day. So let's do the math really quick. A pound of fat has about 3,500 calories in it. And if you're sleep deprived and burn 400 less calories throughout the day, and you're hungrier, which means maybe for the sake of easy math, you eat an extra 100 calories a day, that's a net total of 500 extra calories a day, which over the course of 7 days or a week is 1 pound per week. Thankfully, this also works in the opposite direction. If you're getting sufficient sleep, you'll burn an extra 400 calories a day, and if you're less hungry, maybe you'll eat 100 less calories a day, which is a net total of 500 calories a day, and over the course of 1 week, that's about 1 pound extra that you'll lose every week. Not to mention that that extra pound that you lose will also be much more fat than muscle than if you were sleep deprived, when it would be more muscle than fat. So the amount of sleep you get could determine if you're gaining a pound a week or losing a pound a week. If you have any questions about the study or want me to review more literature in this area, please comment below. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps the algorithm get this video to more people and helps grow the channel. Thanks for watching.